Welcome to Networking Field Day 14. We are here with Nyansa, who will be presenting to a group of invited delegates from the networking community who will be offering opinions, discussion, and their perspective on technology. If you would like to learn more about this video, please go to our website at techfieldday.com or check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/techfieldday.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Howdy.
Good afternoon.
Oh.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
It's been a long day for me, too. I flew in from Arkansas this morning. No one likes to really admit to that, but it's where I live. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. This is kind of a two-parter. I'm the slide monkey, but we only have like 4 or 5 of them. And then we're going to turn it over to the guy who actually knows the product. So we want this to be super interactive. I know you guys don't know, most of you don't know who we are yet, what we do. Hopefully you will in just a few minutes. But again, ask a lot of questions. We left time for that, for a lot of discussion. We did the last network field day. We only did an hour slot, and we didn't get through anything. So a lot of great questions then as well. So who is Nyansa? So cloud source network analytics, David and I came up with the biggest amount of marketing jargon we could put into one slide. That's what we came up with. The only thing we didn't put in is big data, but it didn't sound right. So what is, wow, this is not showing up. Anyway, so who is Nyansa? So Silicon Valley startup. So again, Anand is one of the 3 co-founders, started in about 3 years ago. A lot of good technical background here. Anand is the MIT guy. I give him grief for that all the time. PhD, right? That's nice. Did you bring it with you?
I think so.
Did you bring your thesis with you? No, okay. I would carry it around with me. So we do make money. So we came out of stealth mode April of last year. So we had a few customers building up product, but we came out in April and we've had quite a lot of success. We've been very thankful for that. A lot of big names we can drop, throughout the presentation. So what is it we do? So we are a network analytics solution. Now again, everybody in 2016 and 2017 is saying they do network analytics. We're at Cisco Live. It was the cool thing to do. Everybody is doing analytics. We believe that analytics should provide an answer. That if you really think about what analytics is it shouldn't just give you more data. More data is not, we don't consider that to be innovative. So we don't have any different data sources than any other company. We're not doing anything spectacular with how we gather data. But what Anand and his team do is when you gather all these data sources, how do you make something that creates intelligent conclusions and makes intelligent decisions? And that's what it's all about. So we look at things a little bit differently. So you guys may ask, who's our competition? As egotistical as it may sound, is we don't really talk about competition. We don't have any in our little tiny space. So when we go talk to customers, we're not saying, hey, look, buy us instead of vendor X. Those discussions, oddly enough, with all the people we've talked to, don't really happen. So they don't say, okay, we want to displace this company because you said. We're not network management. We're not network monitoring. We look at the entire network from the user perspective. So I don't remember everybody's name. Denise?
Yeah.
So Denise, let's say that you connect with your iPhone to a network running Voyance. So David and I started, we didn't like the name Nyansa, so we called the product Voyance. So that's what you can call it. So when you connect, and if it's to a network running Voyance, Voyance knows your experience. So you interact with an application, pick one, it doesn't matter. Whether you connect wired or wireless, we know what experience Denise had. So was it good? Did you have a good Skype call? Did you have a good Office 365 experience? Voyance knows. If it was a poor experience, Voyance knows why. So from, again, access to application, maybe DNS was lagging, maybe Radius didn't authenticate quickly, maybe the backhaul isn't good. Voyance knows that information because we see everything. Now you guys are going to probably say, well, how do you get all the data? The simple answer is deep packet inspection, and we connect to Wi-Fi systems like controllers. But we know everything that happens, and we quantify it. So quantifying it is, and this is something I don't know, you guys came out with a couple months ago, really, which was customers want to know a level of badness. Tell me how bad something is. And so they decided to quantify that in a number of hours of bad something to a user. So Voyance may say, Chris had a really bad experience for this many hours, or all your users in this network had a total of 350 bad hours of DNS experience. So it quantifies that in an amount of time of how bad was something happening. That user experience is what we use to measure a network. So again, we're not going to replace a network management system. We're not going to replace a SolarWinds. We look at it as very complementary. We don't tell you, hey, your router is up, down. We don't say you have 70% utilization on a system. That's not our thing. We aren't trying to do that. What we will say is, your network is having issues. We see your users experiencing problems because of some service. Again, Wi-Fi applications, et cetera. I use the analogy of, if you get on Google Maps and you see that Highway 101, very close to us here, has no construction. It's perfect. There's no construction whatsoever. Does that mean there's no traffic? Or does that mean there's no slowdowns? No, it doesn't. They don't equate to each other. So a router and switch and server being all green doesn't mean that an end user has a good experience. They're not always related. So we look at hundreds of, if not thousands, in some of our customers, hundreds of thousands of client devices, and we determine what the network health is by what the users experience. Any thoughts or questions so far? I tend to talk a lot. That's good? Okay. So the first thing that Voyance does is a baseline. So a baseline is a lot like if I go to the doctor. If I go to the doctor and the doctor says, all right, GT, you're severely overweight, man, you should work on that. That's a baseline. Now that doesn't mean it's good, it just means that's what I am today. So Voyance looks at a network and says, here's what you are today, bad or good. If there is something that spikes, so we don't have SLAs. So if you fired up Voyance today in your network or a network of one of your customers, if you saw it up and running, within a couple hours, you'll start getting a baseline. And that baseline will say, here's a percentage of badness on DNS, made up thing. Okay? 3% of all your users are having bad DNS. That would be an example of a baseline. So that baseline is, again, not saying bad or good at this point. That's your normal. But what if all of a sudden you went from 3% to 6% to 10 to 15%? Would you guys want to know that? Yeah, that's out of the norm. So again, you don't have to program an SLA. If I hit 6%, please notify me. Voyance doesn't work that way. It's if I am deviating a lot, 2x, 3x, then it will raise the priority of that incident, what we call a blast radius. How many people are affected goes up. That's a big issue. That's something that you guys want to be made aware of. With every problem, whether it's an individual user, I mentioned Denise earlier, or it's a systemic problem on the network, Voyance will tell you the symptoms. How many of you have ever been in a war room or on a war room email? Right? Mm-hmm. How many of you have pointed the finger? Not that finger. Some of you have done that, right? You'd be like, hey, look, my stuff's working. Have you checked yours? Right? People do this, it's okay. Voyance does this for you. Voyance literally says HTTP good, Wi-Fi good, application good, DNS bad, radius bad, big old bad X's through it. And in the beginning, if you guys ever get to see Voyance, you want to try it, you will say, I don't believe it, right? You guys shouldn't believe software right when it comes, you don't trust us. I don't blame you. It's this brand new software that's telling you what's wrong with the network. So with one click from there, you can see the data that Voyance gathered to make that decision, that determination. So it's not blind faith. In the beginning, what we see is a lot of our customers will definitely dig deeper every time, and as this trust builds up, then they start not doing that as much. Oh, Voyance says it's a backhaul issue, it's a backhaul issue, right? It's been right so far. One of the things that's cool about this is because it's based on real data that's moving, and this baseline is established, there are very, very few false positives. The only ones that I see, and Anand, you can correct me if I'm wrong, are if it's maintenance and someone didn't notify Voyance, hey, there's a maintenance and a bunch of alerts go off, then that's kind of the best false positive I've seen. I don't know if that's right?
Sure.
You're allowed to speak now.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, that's all you were supposed to say. So.
I just agree with the guy.
That's good. That's the number one rule of improv, man. You always agree. The other thing we talk about is not only the symptoms, but the root cause. So Voyance, again, this is where we look at analytics should be different. Analytics should provide an answer, not just accumulation of a bunch of data. You guys could go do packet captures if you just wanted a bunch of data. What we say is, here's the symptoms of this problem, and here's what Voyance believes is the root cause. Any thoughts so far?
Do you collect flow data?
Not yet. We do deep packet inspection on all data.
Okay, so how, right? I mean, do you have an appliance that sits in line and gathers the packets and deeply inspects them?
Very, very close. We have a slide and a couple slides on that, but it's not in line, but you're absolutely right. Basically,
Okay.
we're sitting there
You have a
listening.
tap and you ship some data over to
Perfect.
it. And yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
So everything here is very plain text. It seems like, what I've seen is very much, this is the problem, this is the solution. It's like kind of like what syslog wants to be when it grows up. That's the thing, because I looked at some of your stuff, and that seems to be the plain text offering of here's root cause, problem, and solution. That seems to be, the main thing, the main value. Is that right?
That is a big part of the value, I would say.
Okay.
The added value, which would be a good segue, is how, if I told you, this is a smart room, 0.2% of all your ARP traffic on your network was failing. 0.2% requests go out, all your requests go out, 0.2% do not get a response. Is that good or bad?
Who knows?
Huh?
Maybe.
Maybe? Anybody have an answer?
Depends on the 0.2%.
Depends on the 0.2%. That's a fair
Depends on
answer.
the network.
Depends on the network.
I mean, that's where your baseline comes in, right? I mean, but
Well, that is where
you see a spike in a lack of requests to ARP responses. That's a problem.
it is a problem, but is it one that you should put resources into? Another one, if I say 3% of your DNS is failing, you guys don't really know if that's good or bad, but we can tell you because we compare that number against other networks. So for example, we have a lot of higher education. So that's a nice big vertical for us right now. We also have retail and healthcare, but I'm using that as an example. So we compare, and Anand will show this during the demo, is he will compare one higher ed, what he's going to log into Brandeis University. They allow us to show their data. And it will show a benchmark against all the other higher eds that meet within the same category. That category being that they're all higher ed, they all are within a certain size range. You'll see some smaller, you see some larger. But what this will tell you is that 0.2% ARP that you'll see where does Brandeis fit? As an example, they're really good at Wi-Fi. They have like 1% Wi-Fi congestion. They know that's good because when they hit benchmarks, they're better than every other school that we have as a customer. But when it comes to ARP, they sit about the middle, at least last time I checked. They're benchmarked somewhere in the middle. What that tells Brandeis and it tells our customers is there's room for improvement. So where, again, some of the smartest minds in networking sitting here in this room, you guys don't know if those numbers mean anything. So that's what we saw that. Our customers aren't going to naturally know that. So compare your network against others. This is all anonymous. I know there's probably security concerns in the room here. We have gotten beaten up by some of the largest companies and universities out there who just throw hackers at us and see what they can do. So we have security documents to show you how that's done. We think we can pass most any security review. I would say probably sans government. But it's all anonymous and it shows how you compare. You can also do this multi-site. So we have customers that have 50 plus sites. So how does one site compare to another? One of the cool features that I love is viewing and annotating a change. How many of you have ever made a change to the network and hoped it fixed the problem?
Never.
Nobody's going to raise
No,
their hand.
never happened.
Never. I know exactly what. No.
Okay. It's probably happened. I think this will fix it. I think this will make the user experience better. Voyance knows the user experience all the time. So if you make a change, somebody give me a change that maybe one of you recently made. Fix a network. To make it optimized, let's just not talk about go, no go. That's easy. There's no reason to track that. What about something is slow, I want to make it faster?
QoS changes. I'm saying it for Greg.
Perfect.
No quas
That's a great
changes in.
example, actually.
There's no quas changes in my network because there's no quas.
So you do a QoS change. Did it make a difference? You do an annotation.
No.
You say, made a QoS change. You annotate that in Voyance. Now you can do this per site, per location, per building, whatever you choose. But then you can watch how that affected end user performance from there. So if you made that change, maybe to one customer, you now can have quantifiable data to what to do to other customers or other sites within that same customer. So I grew up in the Wi-Fi world. You guys, heard I was from Ruckus. To me, Wi-Fi is one of those dark art, we pretend like we know what we're doing, but half the time we're guessing. This helps quantify it. We made a change. We have a university customer. I was on site locally. I said, hey, you guys should try this. They tried it, 33% improvement in student Wi-Fi from one change. In all other times I've ever made that change, I haven't been able to quantify it. Are the help desk calls going down? Are people less upset? These aren't real things to quantify, but we do that here.
So in that, going into that, is that in Wi-Fi as a part of that, is a component of that? So if I've got, frequency overlaps in my AP spread, that's something also that's going to show up in Nyansa along with normal fixed network problems as well?
Correct. What we found statistically, we're tracking 2.5 to 3 million client devices right now. 70% is Wi-Fi, is the problem, is Wi-Fi. So a lot of times that's why we're at Mobility Field Day, right? A lot of people care about that. But that other 30% is also really important. Sorry.
No, that's great because that's a really, you're right, that is a dark art. Trying to understand if you're doing frequency planning or things like that, and whether it's an enterprise Wi-Fi or whatever, that's a huge challenge. Can you quantify that we made it better by making this change?
Yeah, and Voyance actually has recommendations. Here's the next steps we think you should take. And that's good for some larger customers like you guys. You guys are probably not going to find the next steps all that incredible because you guys know what you're doing to solve a problem. But a lot of customers don't. They don't have the resources to have experts on staff to do that. So the next steps thing can be very helpful to point them in the right direction. So we see kind of 3 distinct use cases for Voyance. And I would say it's a good and a bad. It's a little bit, right now our interface is not split for these use cases, although that is coming. Support. So one of the neatest features, just to be able to search for a device, I know that sounds simple, but to go back in time. So again, Chris, is it? Chris? So Chris, again, maybe you're the technician, maybe you're the person with the problem. Hey, I didn't get a chance to call you. That problem happened at lunch last week. With Voyance, you can go back in time. You choose lunch on Thursday, and then for that device, and you see exactly what that device went through, transaction by transaction. And it says, here's the problems that Chris's device had Thursday at lunch. Here's the root cause of that problem, and here's how to solve it. So David kind of calls it the network DVR. It is. You want to go back and watch what happened? It's recording it. Voyance knows all of that that's happening. And you get to go back and look. To me, that's huge to be able to do that.
GT.
Yes, ma'am.
So what's the scaling factor on that? How does it scale? How large does it scale? How many end users?
We have not hit a limit yet. So we have customers, a couple 100,000, I think.
Few 100,000.
Yeah, so Walmart, I'm name dropping now. Maybe I shouldn't say that live.
Small place in
small place,
Arkansas.
no. So we do have some customers that are using very high numbers of users. Even universities are 30, 40, 50,000 users. So again, because of the architecture, so we're cloud-based, and you'll see that in the next slide, because of the way our crawlers work on site, each of them can process about 18 gigs per second, and that's almost infinitely scalable. You just keep adding crawlers and you can throw more data at them. And the way that the cloud scales is that we haven't hit a limit. So I'm not going to say there isn't one. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but so far we haven't seen it.
Okay.
Is that a good enough answer? Yeah. Perfect. I always have to check with my lawyer. Did I say that right?
Yeah, sure.
And again, so on the support side, what we found is, again, depending on the level of person you have on your support team, they may love the root cause. That root cause will tell them very, very quickly whether they should escalate or not, and who to. Again, I have the privilege of visiting some of our customers, and they have a crazy labyrinth of support on where something should go to solve a problem. So, hey, it should go from here to this tier 1 to this tier 2, whatever it may be. Those next steps can help direct them with education. The other thing, I know it's a small thing, that URL is persistent. So if you have a problem with a user, you copy that URL, and then you could send that to anyone all the way up the chain, and they see the same information. So they know why the first level support person escalated that, because Voyance said it was a Wi-Fi coverage issue. Support person's not going to solve that. The other is network operations. So there's really kind of two pieces here. The incident side. The incident side is you get a text, you get an email, something bad happened. And that typically is a P2 or P1 issue. Those are only generated if a significant deviation happens. That deviation is configurable. We typically, our customers tend to stay with defaults. But let's say you really care about an application. Anybody have an application they just have to have up and running all the time?
Citrix.
Citrix, okay. Do we track that? We are, perfect. So we're tracking Citrix. So if that deviates maybe by 1.5x, as opposed to 2x or 3x off normal baseline deviation, that can raise the priority very quickly for you, where maybe you don't care about Netflix. So if it goes 4x, 5x, I don't care, don't alert me. So you can configure that. So that is incident. That is, I have a problem I need to solve today. You click on the link in the email or the text, one click to the root cause, and then again, you can diagnose, if you want to get deeper in the data, you can definitely do that. The other is finding hotspots. So there's two, I told you about my analogy, I go to the doctor. I go to the doctor for two reasons, a checkup, and I go for an emergency. So if I have a cut, that's these first three, right? You get the email, something bad's happened, I need to solve it now. The other is, okay, we don't have an emergency, but I don't like my baseline. Maybe you were baselined at 7% of DNS congestion. You have found by the benchmarking that it's not acceptable in your industry. That's too high for you. You want to go solve that. So if it is something that is location-oriented, now again, depending on your scaling, DNS could be that. Maybe radius can be. A more specific example is Wi-Fi. So Wi-Fi is a great example of bad hot, there's always areas that are bad. So with one click, you're like, hey, I want to solve this systemic problem I have with a service. You click most affected locations, and that will tell you on your campus or among your 1 or 1,000 sites, where are you having the worst problems with a service or application. So then you can, again, cut that low-hanging fruit of badness as you have time and your team has time, and you continue to work your way down.
So is there multiple baselines per location or per, say, client? And how are those multiple baselines established?
I'll let Anand take that one, actually.
Okay.
So actually, when I show you guys the demo, it'll be really obvious. But I mean, for any metric, actually, we do a baseline, right? So your internet performance will be baseline. Your Wi-Fi performance will be baseline. Your Citrix performance will be baseline, that kind of thing. And then that's scoped to particular locations, like a particular building there. We'd baseline that. We'd baseline it across the whole site. We'd baseline it inter-sites. So all of that is in the product.
How granular does that get? Are you to the point where, okay, we know the internet pipe is congested, so you've got this issue here. Do we know that it's congested because everybody's on Facebook? Or is there a way to get to that granular level of detail?
Yeah, so certain applications we actually pick out and say, okay, you know what? This is an important, Skype for Business.
Yeah.
That's an important application. We're going to baseline that just on its own. Internet, we sort of just do generally. We say, okay, let's pick a few reliable websites like Google, Facebook, that kind of thing. And then let's just baseline, TCP retransmits and TCP latency and things like that, and establish a good level of performance.
So there's kind of a portfolio of cloud apps and cloud services that you guys kind of take a look at and rate as far as performance on. Okay.
Yep. And you can define a custom application. So if you have some homegrown application in your data center that you want to define, then we track everything to that.
That's pretty cool.
Yep.
That's a neat trick.
Yep.
And it's 60 seconds to set that up.
Okay.
Ish. Yeah. Pretty simple.
50. No, I'm just kidding.
MIT, man. I love it. Great question. Anybody else have questions before we sell you some more and stuff? So the last one here is the CIO, network director. It is, he or she wants to validate investments. A lot of you introduce yourselves as consultants. As a consultant, one thing that we have consultants do is they annotate their existence. So if you go in, let's say you say, hey, you should be running Voyance. They get it installed, let it baseline for a week. Then you guys go in and do your thing. You guys go in and start doing your fanciness, annotate that, and now you can prove your value. And trust me, it tracks it. And you will see whether you're recommending new features, new products, new configurations. As those go in, you annotate that and you can validate what you bring to the table. As opposed, and it's huge, huge, when someone can go and say, this is what we've done. And you can take that report, maybe make it anonymous, and say, here's what I've done for other businesses as well. Anybody MSPs in here? Okay. So we do have an MSP interface. So if you have multiple customers, again, you can come into how many customers do I have? Click on that customer and drive in. So again, benchmarking, how do we compare to other organizations? CIOs have to go get money from somewhere as well. So he or she may say, okay, we are not benchmarking well in this category. Let's go spend some resources there. Whether, again, it's talent or product, whatever it may be.
GT, I got a quick question from Twitter.
Okay.
Richard McIntosh would like to know, what happens with your solution when there's like a massive power outage or a network outage? Because we all know that in other solutions, like there's a big SNMP like tidal wave of everything is down and the world is ending, when it may only be one link that actually went down. How do you guys handle something like that?
Well, we don't know about it because our crawler went down with the power. I made that up. I don't know. That's the best answer I could come up with.
No, it depends on where it happens, and it depends on whether it affects the baseline enough, right? It has to have a significant deviation in some metric, right? So let's say, one of the internet links went down and now you've gone to your backup link, but that link is much slower. Then maybe the percentage of people having slow internet all of a sudden goes up significantly, and that becomes a priority 2 issue. Versus normally it's like a priority 6 issue or something like that.
But that also could be, you could also suppress that. So if you knew you went to a backup link, you could say, we're going to suppress that. Now also, and so again, Anand's here to correct me. One of the things you're going to see in Voyance is that you're going to see graphs that look incomplete. And they look incomplete because what you guys care about is performance at peak. If we say, hey, look, your performance at Saturday at 2 a.m. in your enterprise was this, you're like, great, that's completely useless. So you're going to see blank spots, and those blank spots are when peaks weren't happening, because that is not, again, Anand will explain this better than I will, it's not as significant, right? A graph that says, here's the usage up and down, you don't see that in the first level interfaces in Voyance. So if there is a power outage, Voyance could read this as just a low downtime in network. So it won't alert, again, I could be wrong, it won't alert because basically it looks at it as a low usage. There's not a high, it always knows what peak is. 7,000 users, this much data, it knows what peak congestion is. So if there is no peak at that time, it's not going to report something like that. Am I somewhat? Yeah. Okay.
Well, I don't want to let Anand off that easy here.
Sure.
Okay, so we talked about baselines and anomalies and factors of difference, right? Say 3%, and you want to alert on 3 times. But now I think what Rich is talking about is there's now 100% failure in something.
Okay.
That is.
And 30-somethings, right? Because
It
our
could
main implement
potentially, yes.
is down, and we got 30 sites now that are.
Yeah. So
Right.
the network cable for my DNS server went bad, right? Now I have 100% DNS failure.
Yeah.
That's a different event than it got a little worse.
Yeah. No, so everything that So we measure things in different ways. One way is by client interactions. So what's the percentage of clients that's affected by a certain problem? Now that deviating sort of gives you a certain level of priority, and that's sort of something you want to compare to your baseline because you want to know when that changes, right? So that would change from 10% normally getting affected, 100%. That would increase the priority. We also do things from the infrastructure perspective as well. So we might look at all of the DNS requests going to this particular DNS server, right, have now gone up, like none of them are getting answered. So it's really like a binary yes, no. It's like, is it up or is it down? And when something like that goes down, we would also generate an alert as well. But that's a different kind of binary alert versus, a lot of customers, in order to control false positives, which GT brought up earlier, want to look at it as, just tell me when my client percentages deviate from baseline, Because if a server goes down, and let's say it was the backup server or something like that, and it's not affecting many clients, then maybe I don't care about it. I would, reduce the priority. But we do it both ways, and so you can configure that.
But, and I guess what I heard Tom ask from Twitter, and I'm not sure that I really heard the answer. Maybe I did and I missed it. But, so let's say we have a link failure, and now we have 30 sites with outages. Am I going to get this flood of alerts, or there's this roll-up process that happens? This is this whole big swath of alerts is related to this one incident.
Yeah. So that's something we're working on right now. It's going from the initial solution was kind of optimized for a single site with a lot of locations and sort of detecting baseline deviations and things like that from that. More and more, we're getting customers with hundreds of sites. And to your point exactly, you end up with problems where you get 40 different alerts. They're all legitimate, but they're all related to one thing. And sort of rolling that up is something that we're working on right now.
One thing I want to, again, it sounds like a sales pitch. So again, I've come from larger vendors than Nyansa. When Anand says he's working on it, or the team is working on it, our roadmap is maybe 6 months out, meaning it's so variable. A bunch of really smart guys and gals working really hard. So when we say, hey, we're going to have this feature, I mean, a lot of times these guys put it out in 30 days. So there's code updates on the cloud. Users don't have to do anything every 2 weeks, basically on cadence. New features, bug fixes. Bug fixes are constant, but new features come out every 2 weeks. So we move very, very quickly. Any questions? So one last one here was just adoption trends. What if you have a customer, so we have a customer that has their own custom app, and they want to know adoption of the use of that. Now there are a lot of ways and a lot of tools to do that, but we have that built in where we can show trending of how many people, what is the usage of this app, and by application, how much traffic is moving on an application per user, per site, per company. The last slide here is basically, how does this all work? So Yvonne said this earlier, right on the money. We do deep packet inspection. So we have this thing called a crawler. It's really probably better called an inspector. Its job is to do 3 things. It connects to the wireless LAN controller. Today we support Aruba and Cisco. So we do, depending on those 2 vendors, do things a bit differently. But we connect to those controllers via, say, SNMP as an example. And we do listen to what they're giving us, and then we request data via SNMP. That's 2 pieces. Or sorry, that's one thing that we do on the controller. The second piece is we do deep packet inspection on all data you will send us. Now that is a variable. We don't charge by megabit or gigabit or anything like that. So if you say, hey, we have 1,000 users and we want to do a site, our hope is that you send us everything, because that is better for you. You will get a better experience if you send us everything. The way our architecture works is those VMs, again, we can deliver those in an appliance. We're not an appliance company. So you can spin up on one site. If you said, hey, we need to do 100 VMs on a site, great, go spin them up. Again, we're not charging by that either. So that gives you flexibility in architecture. So if you have multiple sites or a campus with an odd architecture, or depending on what data you want to get, you can put in as many of these crawlers as you like with no penalty of dollars, no penalty, except it does take your time to do that. So what we do is that crawler does deep packet inspection on whatever data you will span or tap to that. So again, we prefer to have as much data as you want, as you'll give us. The third thing that crawler does is it turns all that data into metrics. We are not storing nor sending packet data. So if you have your SSL, you have your unencrypted data, whatever that is, that never leaves the premises. So again, the crawler's job is to take all of that data from the controller, all the deep packet inspection, turn it into metrics, and send it northbound to the cloud.
GT. So you had mentioned that the crawler can scale up to about 18 gigabits per second. So when you're taking that and creating the metadata, from the captures that you've done and sending that to the cloud, how big of a stream is that going to result in?
Great
up to
question.
the cloud.
Great question. So for those of you who didn't hear it, it's how are we going to affect the WAN traffic?
Yeah.
For every gigabit per second, we're about 400 to 500 kilobits per second. So in your 18 gig example, so you can say on the high side 9 megabits per second northbound. That's just kind of a general rule we use.
What was the rule again? Say it again.
About for every gigabit per second that is streaming through the crawler, about 400 to 500 kilobits of metrics go to the cloud.
Half a meg.
So very, very WAN efficient. Any question on this architecture?
Does WAN optimization mess with that any? Have you guys got any environments running WAN optimizers? Does that mess with your metrics at all?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, good question though.
Yeah.
Yes, sir?
You've got one crawler that's connected into the wireless controller, but you can also connect it into get information from other switches and other devices on the network via span or tap ports.
So correct. So the architecture, the question was, what role does the crawler play? Is it getting data from a controller or not? Really, they can do either or both. So let's say a single campus like UTK, okay, that's a university. They have Gigamon or Arista there. So they literally plugged one tap into one crawler, and we have the whole campus. As opposed to some types of networks, that same amount of data may need 5 crawlers depending on the physical, the architecture. So you could have one that just does controller data. So again, we have customers. They have a data center with controllers. That's all it does is just get controller data. And another one that's sitting at a location just getting span data. Again, it all aggregates in the cloud. So there's no limitation of flexibility there. If you want just to do span and just to do a controller, that's fine. It doesn't matter.
So GT, it would seem to me that you could potentially run into some problems with packet duplication as packets were flowing through different parts of the network, depending on where you're tapping. If you're tapping in multiple locations, how do you handle that? Given that you're kind of
it's basically first layer that it hits in our cloud is dedupe.
Okay.
So all the centralization of data is done in the cloud. So let's say 2 crawlers are collecting the same flows. Once they meet up in the back end, they're going to get deduped.
Okay.
Yep.
Is that good?
Yep.
Okay.
But you're able to recognize that as a duplicate flow.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we recognize it and dedupe it.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you actually mean by deep packet inspection?
I think that's
Sure. So basically, it's to do performance analysis. So first off, it's connectivity, right? We track for every single client, are they able to associate with an access point, authenticate with radius, get an IP address, DNS, and then finally transmit something out of the web. So we sort of track the state of every client during that process to see if he's able to succeed. And then there's performance, so latencies, so DNS latency, what applications are being used, what the application performance metrics look like. So Salesforce.com, what is the TCP latency and TCP retransmits and the amount of bandwidth, et cetera, with regard to that particular application. So for any kind of application, any type of connectivity, any kind of, all right, he's got something up there.
Well, I mean, no, keep talking.
Yeah, sure,
I
absolutely.
just kind of wanted to.
So we collect those performance-related metrics, and that's what goes up to the back end to analyze.
And we do, so actually, I think in our security documentation, we get very detailed on what we gather there because people want to know that.
Yep.
What does go northbound as far as that people would be MAC address, IP address, username, does go to the cloud. But again, no data frames ever make it there.
So is there a question?
Sorry.
Actually, you may have just kind of answered it because my question was on HIPAA compliance.
Okay.
Is that an issue? Are you because of the whole cloud thing?
We have gone
HIPAA
through,
compliant?
we do have some healthcare customers that are in purchase and proof of concept. And so far we have not lost, is the right word? We've been fine. We have gone through their compliance and we've been okay.
Oh, okay.
So I know that we're probably not going to get a HIPAA stamp of approval. That's not what we're trying to do, but I think we're fine. And we're also looking at PCI data in some of our customers, and again, we've gone through security review and passed that as well.
Okay.
This whole architecture construct is done on-premise.
Well,
We didn't mic him up for a reason. I'm just.
So this whole architecture can be done on-prem this whole system that we have in the cloud can be done without any data leaving the premise whatsoever. And there are customers of ours that want to do that for lots of different reasons.
So it would work for government customers then?
These ones particularly aren't, but they're just really security conscious. So they don't want any user, what they call PII information at all, leaving their premise.
Right.
So we can support that as well.
Oh, okay.
Is this really a data center solution, or is it more of like where my users are, though?
This is where your users are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, man. Yep.
I'm just going to stand and walk around. And make
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Can I say,
Yeah.
go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. To kind of add on this, and I hate to come in, I was thinking about this with the deduplication. From an architecture perspective, typically a solution like this, we would see you would deploy that crawler kind of in the data center location as your egress, kind of as a collection point. If you're pushing this out towards kind of the user end, right, to the remote sites. It would, because the deduplication is done at the cloud, it seems like we would be sending a lot of data back to the cloud just to be deduplicated.
So typically we actually don't run into the duplication issue, in the sense that the way most people deploy us is most wireless controller architectures are centralized, right? So we get deployed uplink of the wireless controller. So the switch that it's connected to, we see the span data off that port. And we also get the metrics from the wireless LAN controller from there as well. And so when you do that, you sort of collect all of the data at one time itself. So, yeah.
And on the wired data, a lot of times the VLANs are selected per site. So there is some smartness in the configuration on what you grab over span and what you don't per site.
Yeah, but I think I'm thinking less about I understand how the wireless, but more for WAN users, right? So. And actually, even sort of for wireless, there's points in the data center where this traffic is coming through that you're going to see these flows more than once.
Yep.
So it seems like we would kind of start to run into some issues with you having the metric more than once.
Yeah, no, that's true. The reason we tend to insist on being close to the edge is to analyze layer 2 as well. So connectivity is a big part of user performance, right? Just can they even get onto the network? And a lot of that is at layer 2 itself. And so in order to see that traffic, we kind of have to be close to the user.
I don't think we really talked about layer 2 much.
Sure.
Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Oh, no, absolutely. So, someone comes onto the network, right? What are their first interactions? Well, there's association with the wireless, right? So that's .11. But then, once that gets converted to Ethernet, you still have to authenticate with Radius, get an IP address with DHCP. So all of that traffic are for the gateway, right? All of those transactions and interactions, we actually track that for every user. But in order to track it, that state, we need to see that traffic at that layer. Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted a question.
Well, I was just thinking, we talk a lot about watching the wireless controller, but I mean, a lot of us still have lots of wired clients.
Yep.
I mean, from what I'm hearing, I'm wondering if, you've got something in your data center if you've got centralized wireless controllers, but do you even really look at your data center traffic? Is that part of the model, or is it just put it at the edge where your clients are?
So that's a fair point, right? So the main goal of this is user traffic at the edge, right? It's access network performance in the sense that the access network has just gotten very heterogeneous with random devices coming on the network, going over wireless and going over an internet link now, right? And that's what we wanted to focus on. The data centers sort of, we view that as kind of a different problem itself, where it's more east-west traffic, virtualization, multi-tiered applications. We don't solve that problem.
And we've made a conscious decision to not go there.
Yeah.
Just because it's a little more competitive and we want to just kind of stay focused on the user side.
Yep.
So is this just an enterprise solution? Do you guys have any service provider customers interested in this?
We do have service provider customers.
Okay, wow, that's cool. Because I could definitely see this in the last mile. Is
Yep.
the exact same kind of problems you have as the access to applications. Looking at that in the last mile, that would be very cool.
Definitely. So, all right, excellent.
Sorry, there's a question over here.
Sorry.
Oh, one more question.
That's why I'm here, brother.
Absolutely.
I'm trying to, I guess, understand sort of the degree of granularity that you're after. Are you tying your analysis to individual users and the applications those users are using? So, for instance, there's a person who's on a Skype call and also using Salesforce at the same time, you can track to, we noticed that during the Skype call, out of a 30-minute Skype call, there was 10 seconds of jitter, and we'll tie it to this switch or something. Is that
Yes.
the level of detail
yes,
you're going
yes.
after?
So it's not. It's more granular than user. What we see are client devices, right? So username might have phone, laptop, like so. But
Okay, but
for every single device.
so this laptop
Yep.
on this
Exactly.
AP, okay.
Exactly. Yep.
And just and healthcare as well. You know, a lot of headless devices as well.
Yeah.